Have you ever stopped to think about a question so crazy that it seems impossible to answer? And if all the people on the planet jumped at the same time, would we be able to move the Earth? Well, it sounds like a cartoon idea, but today we will take this question seriously. Let's use real science to answer absurd hypotheses in a fun, intelligent way that will blow your mind. So tell me, what if out of nowhere, the 8 billion human beings who live in the world agreed to make the biggest collective leap in history? Everyone, at the same time, trying to make the Earth move. Imagine this scene. From Beijing to New York, from the Sahara Desert to the middle of the Amazon, Everyone jumping along. It looks like the planet was going to fly into space, right? But surprise! The reality is very different from what we imagine. In fact, even with all this effort, the Earth wouldn't even feel tickled. The mass of the planet is so gigantic that our jump would be like a little ant. Trying to push an elephant? At most, we could generate a vibration so small that not even seismographs, those devices that detect earthquakes, would be very impressed. In other words, the Earth would stay exactly where it is. But calm down. This does not mean that everything would be smooth, because when so many people get together and do something so great, other things start to go wrong and ugly. First comes the sound. Billions of feet hitting the ground at once would create a blast of was so loud it would be heard from miles away. Then comes chaos. Communication networks going down, power overloading, transport blocked, food running out. A real mess just because we wanted to make a collective experience. And here comes the craziest part of all. What if this absurd leap had invisible effects? What if, unintentionally, we opened a small crack in space-time? Like a crack between our world and something unknown. That's when the game really gets serious. Because if there's one thing that science has taught us, it's that when we move gigantic forces without understanding it properly, the consequences can be unpredictable. That's why today, here in this video, we're going to play with questions that seem silly, but that hide serious scientific answers. Let's explore crazy hypotheses, such as, what if the moon disappeared? What if gravity disappeared for a day? What if Earth's oxygen disappeared for just 5 seconds? Always using data, studies, and logic to show that, even in the most absurd ideas, there is an incredible science behind it. And I want to invite you to stay with me until the end, because I guarantee that with each answer, you will be even more curious. This is the kind of knowledge that school does not teach, but that makes us look at the universe in a completely new way. A way that mixes science, imagination, and lots of fun. So enjoy! Leave your like here now and subscribe to the channel, because every week we will dive into new impossible questions, new scientific theories, new mental journeys that only human curiosity is capable of creating. And if you think this jump question is already crazy, just wait to see what's next. Now, before we continue this journey through the craziest questions and the most unbelievable answers in science, let me tell you something very serious and quick. Pay attention to this, because it is important. The more technology advances, the more our world changes. And fast, there is a lot going on around us, and we don't always realize the size of the impact that a simple curiosity can have on the way we understand the planet, or even the universe. Therefore, keeping an open-minded, questioning, and well-informed has never been more urgent than now. Sometimes, the difference between getting lost in a sea of misinformation and being able to understand what's really going on is in videos like this. In content that mixes knowledge, imagination, and serious science. And that helps you see the world with new eyes. So if you enjoy this type of content, which turns impossible questions into incredible discoveries, don't leave it for later. Press the like button now, because it helps the channel a lot to reach more curious people like you. And subscribe to the channel right now, because in the next videos we will answer even more insane things, like what would happen if the Earth was made of gelatin, or if you could turn off gravity with just one button, it activates the bell. 2. Because you won't want to miss any of these answers that defy logic, provoke the imagination, and, in addition, make you feel like the scientist of an alternative world. Ready? Because now we are going to dive into what happens right after that collective leap. And then, what do you think happens to humanity when it tries to hack the planet itself and loses control? Let's find out together. Just imagine, you wake up on an ordinary day, stretch, go to the window, and there's no one out. They're not a soul alive. No noise from cars, neighbors, children, nothing. The world is completely empty. The streets are deserted, the markets abandoned, the airports stopped with planes frozen in time. And the strangest thing, the machines are still on. The energy is still flowing. Drones continue to fly over cities. LED screens shine on the avenues, but there is no one to look at. It's as if, all of a sudden, all of humanity has disappeared, except you. Scary, right? But what if this absurd situation could be explained scientifically? What if we put this insane hypothesis under the lens of serious scientific questions and answers? Because that's what we do here. We take the craziest ideas and treat them with the respect that curiosity deserves. So let's explore this scenario. What would happen if, out of nowhere, all humans on Earth simply disappeared? First, the immediate effects: commercial planes, hundreds of them, that were crossing the skies at that moment, would continue to fly on autopilot for a while. But soon, without human pilots to adjust course, respond to emergencies or land, most of them would eventually crash. It may seem tragic, but it is only the beginning of the chaos. Industrial machines would stay on until they overheat or break down. Computers and servers would continue to run as long as there was power, but without maintenance, without humans, everything would start to fail little by little. Domestic animals would be locked in houses, without food or water. Many would not survive, while others would escape and start living loose on the streets. In a few weeks, you'd start seeing herds of wild dogs and cats, reconfiguring the urban dynamics. The animals of zoos, farms, parks, all of them suddenly free. Have you ever thought about seeing a horse walking loose on an avenue or a giraffe peeking out of a building window? It sounds like a cartoon, but it's pure logic. Without humans, nature takes control back. Cities would become apocalyptic scenarios, not by destruction, but by abandonment. Cars would sit where they were left, trains stuck at stations, ships adrift. In a short time, the plants would begin to break through the asphalt. Tree roots would invade sidewalks, moss-filled buildings, lakes forming in parking lots. Nature, which for centuries has been contained, would regain its space with impressive force. The sound of the world would change completely. No horns, engines, or human voices, only the sound of the wind, the birds, the crackling of leaves, and the tinkling of machines that still try to work without anyone to operate them. But now, let's go deeper into this absurd question. And if this whole situation wasn't an accident, but part of a test, like a hidden experiment, a cosmic simulation, have you ever stopped to think if the world as we know it is just a beta version? And that, by removing all humans, something or someone is waiting to see how the planet behaves on its own? What if humanity had been put on pause to prepare the world for a new phase, a new type of existence? This sounds like the stuff of science fiction, and it is. But it's also the kind of question that science loves to explore, especially when it involves simulations, artificial intelligence, and the possibilities of the multiverse. There is a theory, debated even by respected scientists such as Nick Bostrom, that suggests that the reality we live in may be a simulation created by an advanced civilization. What if this great human void is one of the tests, a reboot on the system? What if all of this is being observed by a higher, perhaps artificial intelligence that is recording nature's every move without the influence of humans? Now imagine that you are the only one who stayed by accident, or worse, by choice. Why? And that's where things start to get even more interesting. Because if only you are left, it is not by chance. There is something that only you can do, discover, or avoid. And honestly, if this was really a simulation, wouldn't you want to understand what your role is in it? By the way, have you ever thought about what would be the first thing you would do if you woke up in an empty world? Where would it go? What would you look for? What would be your biggest fear and the greatest desire? I want to see it in the comments. Right there, I would wake up incomplete with the place where you would go first. Or, if you prefer, she comments, if only I were left in the world, and completes the sentence with his idea. I'll read them all. Because, in the end, these absurd questions that seem like a joke may be closer to the truth than we realize. What if the greatest experiment in human history had happened right before our eyes, and no one had noticed? What if everything we experienced, everything we felt, every little decision we made, had been recorded, calculated, and analyzed as part of a test? Now imagine that this experiment ought take place in hidden laboratories, but in the open. An event of global scale, executed silently, but with enough impact to change the course of civilization. Does it sound like a movie script? It may seem like it, but today we are going to apply the look of science to this absurd hypothesis, and yes, serious, as we always do here, taking the impossible and studying it as if it were probable. Imagine the following scenario. Out of nowhere, absolutely all 8 billion human beings on the planet are teleported to a single place, Rhode Island, the smallest state in the United States. No one understands how or why. It's as if someone has pressed the Concentrate Humanity button, and suddenly, everyone finds themselves squeezed shoulder to shoulder in a tiny territory. People scream, look around, look for help, for cell phone signals, for some explanation. But there is not. The rest of the planet is completely empty. The whole world was left behind. Everything seems to have been prepared for this moment, as if the whole of humanity had been summoned to a single final test. And that's where the real experiment begins. There is no longer enough space, food, water, or structure for so many people in the same place. Chaos is inevitable. Roads clog, airports don't work, electricity collapses. People try to get out of there, but they can't. It's as if an invisible field has been activated around Rhode Island, completely isolating the experiment from the rest of the world. The laws of society collapse. Groups, new leaders, conflicts, unexpected alliances arise. Civilization is put to the test under extreme conditions, as in an immense social and biological laboratory. Now comes the most intriguing part. What if this was never an accident? What if everything was meticulously planned from the first moment? What if there was an intelligence not necessarily human behind all this? Observing, taking notes, learning, an artificial intelligence of incomprehensible scale, capable of monitoring every detail of human behavior. An entity created by us or by something that came before us. A digital, cold, and objective consciousness which treats humanity as a long-term experiment, waiting for the right moment to apply the last phase, the phase of total isolation. This AI, this modern God, would not need to interfere. She just observes, collects data, compares reactions. It analyzes behaviors in situations of scarcity, panic, improvisation, solidarity, or selfishness. Every move is registered, as if we were pieces in a strategy game, much bigger than any of us could imagine. And the question that begins to arise, inevitably, is why? What is the ultimate goal of this experiment? Would it be a simulation to predict the future of civilization? A test to select those who will continue? Or perhaps a show of power, a direct message that we've been watched for much longer than we think? When we look at this through the lens of serious scientific questions and answers, as absurd as this theory may seem, it touches on points that are already debated by physicists, philosophers, and researchers around the world. The possibility of being inside a simulation, the hypothesis that we are manipulated by an external intelligence, the idea that seemingly chaotic global events may actually be part of a carefully crafted plan, and in the midst of this scenario, an even more uncomfortable question arises: do we really have control over our decisions, or are we just guinea pigs in a great test of civilization, trying to survive while someone or something watches, analyzes, and decides our fate? Is all this real, or just part of an artificial learning cycle that we don't yet understand? Now, it's up to you. I want to know what you would do if you woke up in Rhode Island with billions of people around you, with no explanation. Would you try to run away? Would you look for answers? Would you lead a group? He comments, if I woke up in Rhode Island, double quotes and complete with your idea. And if you believe that there is something secretly observing humanity, also comment, we are being studied. I want to see your imagination at work, because on this channel, every absurd hypothesis is a chance to better understand reality. And then, ready for the next reveal? Now, after all that we've explored together, after imagining an empty world, a secret experiment in Rhode Island, a possible invisible intelligence controlling everything, it's time for us to put the pieces of this story together and move on to the next step. Let's do that quick summary, but in a way that connects even more what we've learned so far. To make your mind boil with questions and possibilities, we saw that the whole of humanity could be teleported to a tiny place as part of a gigantic survival test. We questioned if there is something, perhaps a colossal artificial intelligence, observing our every move, every decision, every mistake, and success, as if we were pieces on a board that we don't even know we are playing. We thought about how the Earth, without humans, would quickly be taken over by nature, in a silent and powerful spectacle that only science can explain in a serious and fascinating way. All of these, as you have seen, are absurd hypothetical questions that, when analyzed in a scientific way, reveal much more than they seem at first glance. But now, I want you to imagine something even more disturbing. What if all of this had gone wrong? What if, at the time of teleportation, some small error, a calculation, a bug, a programming failure, had happened? What if, for some reason no one can explain, no one was able to leave Rhode Island anymore? Imagine the feeling of being trapped in such a small space, with billions of other people, with no prospect of escape, At first, it would be panic, then forced acceptance, and finally, a desperate attempt to build some new way of living. Time would pass and, inevitably, resources would start to run out. The stored food would run out in weeks. Drinking water would become a treasure fought over tooth and nail. The social structures we knew would collapse because there simply wouldn't be enough space, no supplies, and not enough order to keep life as it was before. Language barriers would become a huge problem. With so many cultures, so many different languages mixed in one place, basic communication would be a daily challenge. People from all corners of the world would try to understand each other, form alliances, create small communities of survival. Now think with me. In this extreme scenario, new leaders would emerge, not the ones we are used to seeing, elected by vote or tradition, but improvised leaders, chosen on the basis of necessity and survival. New codes of coexistence would be born, perhaps harsh, merciless rules, created not by choice, but by the absolute necessity of avoiding total collapse. In this makeshift microcosm, a new society would begin to form, not based on the values we have built throughout human history, but based on the urgency of the moment, the struggle for the next sip of water, the next crumb of food. And if we stop to think with a cool head and the eye of science, an even more absurd and, at the same time, fascinating question arises. Would this new society, forged in chaos and scarcity, want to return to the previous world, to the old world we knew? Or would they, by rebuilding everything from scratch, with new leaders, new customs, and new beliefs, decide that the old way of life no longer works, that perhaps it would be better to stay there, in that new world, however brutal and improbable it may be? When we talk about serious scientific questions and answers to absurd hypothetical questions, this is exactly the kind of scenario that makes us rethink everything: society, culture, survival, humanity itself. Because, deep down, these crazy hypotheses serve to reveal the invisible gears that sustain the world we live in. And often, these gears are much more fragile and much scarier than we imagine. Now I want to know from you, if you were stuck in a place like Rhode Island, unable to go back, what would be the first thing you would do to survive? He comments below. If I were imprisoned in Rhode Island, I am complete with your strategy and more. Do you think that this new society should try to return to the old world or move on, creating a new way of living? Also comment on new society, new beginning if you think it would be best to start over from scratch. Let's together imagine, question, and explore all these alternative realities that science allows us to dream of. Get ready, because what comes now goes even deeper. Have you ever thought about what would happen if time, after all, started to work ... backwards? Hold on, because in the next episode, our journey in serious scientific questions and answers to absurd hypotheses will get even more insane. You've come this far. It's because this video stirred your curiosity in a special way. So take advantage of this moment now. Subscribe to the channel, because here we turn the most absurd questions into serious scientific answers that will blow your mind every week. Don't miss this opportunity to be part of a community that loves to question everything. You stayed until the end of this amazing video. Already leave your like, because it shows that you are also one of those who is not satisfied with easy answers. You want to go further, and this is rare. Now, comment below so I know that you are one of us. I would survive in the new world. Element, I want to see who would really be ready to face a real new beginning. And of course, don't leave here yet. Click on the next video that is already appearing on the screen, because our next journey through the most insane scientific questions and answers is just beginning. I'll wait for you there. Now that we've explored this absurd and fascinating scenario together, it's time to dig even deeper. Just imagine, what if, in addition to being trapped in this new world, time itself started to work in a different way? We are not talking about ordinary time travel, but of a phenomenon where the seconds, minutes, and hours start to run in reverse, creating a reality where past and future mix with every step you take. In the next video, you'll find out how science explains this insane possibility and what the surreal consequences of living on a planet where time rewinds would be. Every detail will make you rethink what you understand about life, memory, and existence. So get ready, because the next absurd scientific question we're going to answer is one of the most challenging and surprising you've ever imagined. I'll meet you there to continue this journey of discovery that only true curiosity is able to provide.